We are live when the board is ready.
It's funny,
No, you're in the wrong seat.
right? Yeah, I ought to be sitting in one seat, John Payson, shouldn't I?
Probably.
Do we want to go ahead? We don't have a quorum.
Ooh, I'd wait on the phone. If I'm not, you're the head chief here.
Well, I was actually talking to Tanya.
Okay.
We only need one.
Well, you're looking at me.
Yeah, there's one 13, so we got 6.
You gotta have 7.
7, one more.
Yeah, just one more time.
That was your
Stephen's the only one
looking
left,
at me.
Fortunately, I didn't have my glasses on, so it wasn't as bad as it could be.
Okay. I hope you haven't started minutes yet.
We officially hadn't started anything.
The live feed.
June 2022 meeting of the Alamance County Planning Board will come to order. What we'll do is skip over the minutes and go to the public comments. And Miss Debbie has signed up to speak, so we'll hear from her and hopefully get a forum forward. I'll let you say your last name.
It's Shane.
Okay.
Yes. I apologize ahead of time, for the lovely folder. These are just folders that I had that were in our closet and because I didn't have time to run out and get some. And I apologize also because I just assumed that the 5 that were up here were the only people. And then today, as I'm getting ready, I'm like looking, I'm like, I felt woefully short. So maybe you guys can share.
There must be something wrong with my.
So sorry. So-
As long as his gift certificate fell out.
Oh.
There must be something wrong with my phone. My gift certificate in here for a flood.
I'm so sorry. Okay, so obviously I'm here to talk about lot size restrictions, which was my big thing for the last, I think I gave it. On the first sheet of paper, that is the blue highlighted is the 23 acres that my husband and I purchased and subdivided to give to our kids and ourselves to build. So there are 3 houses going to be on there. And the properties labeled 1 through 9 on there are all just under 900 acres within a half a mile of my house. Not going in the other direction either, just the one direction. That I know that offers have been made on to buy that land. Number 1 is 36 acres. As you can see, there's already 6 lots across the front of that. Cimarron Homes purchased that, and they have a development going in there that's just 27 homes. But the gentleman that I talked to who was doing the development, he said, oh no, this is going to be really big. Number 3 and number 2, is an additional 315 acres owned by the same people, who I believe are probably going to sell that to Cimarron Homes. The second piece of paper is a little thing put out by the EPA in July of 2010. I highlighted the part where it said, experts predict that if the present growth and water use trends continue, North Carolinians will find it increasingly difficult to satisfy their water needs in the coming decades. The third piece is overuse and depletion, and I've just highlighted the things that can happen with overuse and depletion of groundwater. The 1, 2, 3, fourth one is land subsidence, which is sinkholes. I came from Pennsylvania, where there were a lot of sinkholes because of overpumping of groundwater. And what happens when you have a sinkhole, if a sinkhole opens on your property and your home becomes unusable, you just lost the largest investment of your life, because that is not covered under your homeowner's policy because it's earth movement. And then the last thing has to do with, there was actually 57 pages in this study. I did not print all 57 pages. It just has to do with groundwater recharge in North Carolina. And the highlighted part says, at the other extreme, nearly all man-made structures make the land surface impenetrable and therefore prevent the infiltration of precipitation into the soil. And the effects of structures then is to reduce the size of groundwater recharge areas. The following page shows what the groundwater recharge is on a forest, and then on highly historic compacted lawns, which is basically nothing. So that's all I wanted to say, other than that. What I was proposing was a moratorium on any approval of development and subdivisions until such time as lot restrictions are in place in our county on any area that's using, that's on well water usage. And then I know we can't prevent progress from happening, but I think that we need to have measured and conservative growth so we don't jeopardize what we have here in Alamance County. Thank you for your time.
Okay. Anybody want to respond? Okay. So has everybody had a chance to read the minutes from the last meeting? You can reach out to anybody that's not being right.
Accept the minutes as today.
Got a motion and a second on the minutes, all in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed? All right, so the minutes will be approved as presented. Okay, so now that brings us to the lot sizes. And Tanya has included in here what the minimums are currently in Alamance County. And I guess everybody's had a chance to look at that. You want to talk about this? You want me to do it?
Well, all I can say, staff has put in there lot size minimums for about any use in the county. You'll see that HIDO is in there, single family residential. You've got your watersheds also, because that affects environmentally some minimums. Just, this is basic information just for discussion tonight. That's all we provided for.
Okay. And you've got on there what my proposal is.
I have that. I can pull that up.
All right.
One second.
So while she's pulling that up, ordinarily I wouldn't be sitting here in a chair seat, but since she's pulling concrete, I am. But my proposal on this is to have a schedule so that the bigger your development is holistically, the larger your lot sizes are. And it is basically, if you've got 1 to 4 lots in your subdivision, they can be 2 acres each. If you go to the 5th lot, then you go to a 3 acre per lot. And that's 5 to 9. If you go to 10, then it's 4 acres. And you go to 15, then that's 5 acres per lot. In other words, if you took a 100-acre farm and you divided it up, you'd have 20 houses on it, not 100. Or potentially 105 or whatever worked out to in math if you was able to put a house on every 30,000 square feet of dirt. So that's kind of where I am in my thinking. And now we've got something to start the conversation with. And for the legal perspective of how to justify this, it's to preserve the rural integrity and heritage of the county. So
I just want to add, we're kind of getting into discussion. The lady you see sitting behind Bill and then, this is Reagan. She's a new assistant county attorney. Patrick is on screen as well for any legal advice that y'all need.
excuse me. The chairman didn't tell me everything I was going to do when he wanted me here. So it's Ray's fault that I didn't.
Well, also interesting, she is a homegrown girl. And of course, tell them where you went to law school.
At Elon in Greensboro.
Right. So almost a homegrown lawyer. And we're very, very pleased to have her.
Yes, we know.
She was working with Judge Newby, our Chief Justice, of the North Carolina Supreme Court, and Trey Allen, one of your former bosses, thanked me not sincerely for stealing her.
So are you speaking as the chairman of the county commissioners or as a lawyer?
Yes.
We'll let the record so reflect. All right.
Did you go over if by chance they put water, sewer?
Well, actually, I read that today when I started looking over this, and of course, as we look on the agenda packet where Tanya has sent out in non-watershed areas, if they provide well or septic, in other words, you can potentially get your lot size down to 8,000 square feet. So in other words, at that rate, you'd be putting 5 houses on an acre. So my proposal on that is, in other words, if you've got water and sewer, you can put it on an acre. And if you 1 to 4, it'd be an acre each. If you go to 5, it'd be 2 acres. 10 would be 3 acres. And if you've got 15 houses, then it'd be 4. So if you took 100 acres of land and subdivided it and you provided water and sewer, then you'd have 25 houses on that 100 acres of land, not potentially 250 or 500 if you absolutely went with the minimums.
What keeps them from building over, I mean, if they go in and build 4 at a time and 4 at a time and 4 at a time, what keeps them from?
Well, so,
I mean,
yeah.
what keeps them from making that happen?
So you're gonna have to, we're gonna have to put some verbiage in there that if there's an original parent tract of land, if Bill owns 500 acres and I go over and buy 8 from it, put 4 houses on it, and then come back the next year and say, well, sell me 8 more acres over here, because you know everything down that in the county, perfect. Then you've got to have some way of keeping up with what's going on. And, you know, I'm gonna be careful with my words here, so y'all lawyers, you listen. And if you need to do the filter thing, you do that. But if we're not careful, we're gonna have developers other than those here in Alamance County buying up large tracts of land and putting every house that fit on them and selling them and going back to their condo in Aspen or wherever. And we gonna be the ones that have to deal with the school and everything else that goes along with that.
That's already happened. How we gonna word it to keep it from?
So we have some language in the current ordinance that talks about how many times you subdivide from a parent parcel, and that's how we pick up from going, what would be a minor subdivision to going through major status. A lot of that has to do with improvements. You start building roads and you're a major status anyway. if somehow you can manage to be along 54 and every bit of the road frontage you have and what you're gonna cut is on 54, then that changes it a little bit. But for now, that's kind of the triggers that we have.
Does that verbiage have levels in it for lots, numbers of lots or acreage or anything?
Well, we do pretty much 10 units, 10 lots or less, we keep it as a minor, unless it has a road involved, and that automatically kicks it to major. And during that process, we do technical review committee that meets twice a month. So that's environmental health, building, planning, NCDOT, ag extension. There's a lot of people involved that can speak at those meetings. To school board or schools are invited. We haven't gotten privilege of them being there, but all of that is involved in the TRC review when we have these major developments so that everybody can weigh in. And that's before they can submit a preliminary drawing, or really surveyors only survey the boundary. This is a very early picture of what they're planning to do. But that process is already here. So we implemented some things that kind of involve as many people as possible at the beginning.
Just a question, what happens if an area starts off well and septic? Initial stages of development, then they decide they want to change over to provide water and sewer. Will that then allow them in that scenario to go to the smaller restrictions with the rest of the neighborhood?
As it is now, yes, you could subdivide what those existing lots were. Unlikely you're going to get sewer anywhere. If your municipalities extend sewer lines, they annex them in.
Oh, yes.
Now, if you're getting Orange Element, it says not yet serve sewer over the county line, we get water, right? You've not seen them come over with sewer? No, so we really haven't gotten any sewer opportunities, so that 8,000 square feet rarely happens. I mean, rarely. But if somebody were to serve it with sewer and they're already existing well and septic, they could go back and chop that up.
So legal question here, and I'm gonna get to you just in a second. Can we put some verbiage in here so that if you subdivide, if you build a subdivision and water and sewer comes available, in other words, it's still got to adhere to the old rules, even if you put the house on water and sewer, you still can't go subdividing the lots.
I'm gonna defer to Patrick.
Patrick, that might be, Patrick next to some research. Patrick, did you hear him?
I did, and that is an interesting, unique way to look at it that would need some research that I can't really speak on at this moment.
But you can look into it.
Yes, sir. So just want to make sure I got this right so I can write it down. Lots subdivided, but then sewer and water come after the fact. And so we're looking whether we can restrict them from hooking up to that water and sewer later to avoid further subdivision. Is that correct?
No.
Okay, correct me.
If we take 100 acres, we put 20 houses on it, so each house on a 5-acre lot. And water, and they're on well and septic. Water and sewer comes available, they want to tie on to it, great, tie on to it. But you cannot at that point then go to subdividing those lots and putting more houses on that, on the other part of those lots that didn't be used.
Mhm.
That's what we want to prevent from happening.
We can look into that, sir.
Okay, Mr. Snow, and I think everybody was here last time, but this is Rob Snow. He's with the health department in the soils division, environmental, yeah. Environmental department. But anyhow, and you had something you want to say?
No?
I thought you raised your hand.
Oh, no.
You did raise
He
your
just
hand.
flinched. Right?
Okay, well, okay, so he's still here with environmental health, listening and advising. So somebody come up with a good question for him.
I'm happy to.
Yeah, okay. I thought you, I'm sorry. Okay.
Cluster homes.
Mhm.
Does this apply? You know, there's the cluster subdivision, or was that zoned in plan only?
So we have some cluster language in the current ordinance, but it's only in balance of watershed. You cannot do that on any other types of land. And then allows you, if you were to do subdivision on regular lot sizes, which is an acre when you're balanced a watershed, and you could get 40 lots originally. The cluster allows you to still only do 40, but you can reduce those lot sizes down and reduce the impact to what would be the watershed. But you're still capped at how many you can do based on cluster. But that's only, right now, it's only a balanced watershed. There was more language in what was in the Snowcap zoning ordinance. But that's something that can be put into the existing subdivision ordinance.
You say water and sewer, but I want to make sure I understand this right. Like after an hospital, we provided water with 3 wells to the whole town.
Mhm.
Before we put in our line, permanent. So we were providing, the town was providing water. Okay. When you say sewer, are you talking about like the city where they pump it in and they pump it out to a pump station? Or are you talking about if they go in and take 2 of their acres and build a septic area?
Yeah.
Is that considered providing sewer? Or when you say providing sewer, you're talking about pumping it out to a pump station,
Like a community
Like the city.
septic
right? Like,
system.
when you say a community, when you say septic, you're like Western High School behind it's got a
Septic,
septic area,
old sand filter. Right.
the old sand filter.
Yep.
So when you say providing sewer, is that running on out to a pump house or to a field?
So in this verbiage right here, where we've got community/public sewer. Now that is anything other than a septic tank and a lateral field per house. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's how we interpret it.
Okay.
It's vague enough not to be as clear as it needs to be.
Yeah, okay. So if the city of Graham runs the sewer out to Whitney Road and I tie on to it, and I'm tied on to the municipal sewer. If there was a way of getting it over to Sykes Hall where they got a facility, then that's sewer. That's public sewer. And if a bunch of us neighbors got together and decided we want to put our own little system in, then that still would be other than the septic tank and the lateral lines.
Okay.
Per, so,
Okay, all right. So if they built 5 houses and they want to take 2 acres and pipe to that 2 acres or 5 acres or whatever for that area, that's considered providing sewer.
it would, and according to this progressive schedule that we got right here, if they want to do 5 houses, they would, if they put a septic tank in for each house, they put the house on 3 acres of land. If they wanted to go out here and dedicate the sewer,
Right.
they'd be putting them on 2.
Okay.
So we still want to keep this so that, well, does everybody remember wood burning stoves? Everybody remember that?
Yeah.
So you know what the draft control is on the front of the stove and the damper in the chimney. Well, we want to cut the draft down and close the damper as much as we can. Because we all feel like if we ain't careful, it's already here. Not coming, but here. So,
Tanya, does any other counties do anything like this?
Rob actually said he was looking at a couple things of how they handle, what was it, Orange and Chatham, like that.
in Guilford, but they're quite a bit different than the way we do it. Orange, for instance, has different designations. There was an agricultural residential status, a rural residential, a low density residential, then high density, but it was much more in depth than just the ones I list. And they would also restrict or have different side, front, rear setbacks for each designation too. So their acreage might be 2 acres for one, and it may be 20 to 25 feet side setbacks. So Chatham, their minimums were 40,000 square feet and 30 if you had public water. So they were slightly higher. I didn't go on. Theirs are much larger packets than what ours are too, so.
But Orange, Chatham, and Guilford County also all have zoning. Is that
That's
correct?
the problem.
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct.
Okay,
he's, and what he's talking about, this category is just his own districts.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's my research, and it's quite extensive.
It is.
And 81 pages, I think, is Janet, or 81 pages, just a lot size.
Yes, sir.
So walk me through this. real quick. Let's
Picture it.
hypothetically, we've got 35 acres of land
Okay.
and only 5 acres of it will perk.
Oh, man. Okay.
But they want to build houses and put a community septic area in the perk land. How many houses can we put on those 35 acres, of those 30 acres?
Well, if you
I mean,
only
I
got
mean,
five.
how does he build-
per-
Or can we, will we allow it? You know, that's,
You're gonna start with.
it's a multi-question question here. Because I think that that's happening or proposed to be happening, or could,
There's several subdivisions that have come out with that, Rob. We've got several out there now that they're doing more of that maybe than they have before.
They are engineered.
right,
Once you go to, 2 houses on a septic system, you're bumping together, or 3 or 4, it becomes engineered. Generally, in the Piedmont and our soils, for a 3-bedroom house, you need 10 to 12,000 square feet. So if you had 5 acres, and that's not counting 20-foot separations between each one, you would be limited to how many septic systems you could get in that 5 acres.
so the 5 acres is really gonna limit the number of houses more so than any of this land here.
It'll limit the houses and the bedrooms, essentially, the way the math works out. The other thing, I guess, to the interpretation of public sewer, to me, is going through a treatment.
Yeah, that was
I
always.
I wouldn't consider a community septic like that little house development we put in there. We
Tiny
did that.
houses.
Yeah, there's
little-
tiny houses, we
Right.
did that. And they had a community septic system. And whether it was, I mean, I can't remember how many tiny houses were gonna go
It
in
was
there.
14 is what we
Yeah, something like that. So I still consider that. It sounds like our interpretation, we could actually consider that public sewer. I don't consider
That's,
that
that
public
was
sewer.
kind of my question was.
Yeah, it
No,
sounds like
not
public
ours.
sewer should go to a treatment
Hey,
center.
my feeling is it's a hard pipe to a treatment plant, not a hard pipe to a septic. field.
Right, that's still.
But that was kind of my question was if you
That's always been ours.
designated so much area.
Rob says that's always been their interpretation. A septic field is not public sewer.
Okay.
That's where the
That's-
community part comes in on the
Well, it's-
designation.
But it's still a septic system.
I totally agree.
Saxapahaw has one that.
Yeah.
It started with a much larger number of houses. A lot of them don't exist anymore because it was put in the 60s.
Mhm.
And it's a septic system that's fed from many different locations, and it's not public, it's community septic.
That-
But it's
That's a
technically
special situation.
septic system, not.
Well, no, it's a sewer treatment.
They still
Oh,
pump.
That,
it.
that other side of the river with the mill has a sewage treatment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right, because
Yeah,
the old
Jordan.
things up there
Jordan's.
across
It's
from the
behind the
Baptist
church. It's right behind.
That's,
it.
that's, you know,
Okay.
you're right. But it's not running.
Yep.
It is running.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, you're gonna need language that defines what you're gonna call public and what you're gonna call.
Well,
septic.
okay, so for clarification here. I kind of had this as a burr under my saddle, if you will. So I brought it up and we put it on the agenda and this right here is just Rodney's brainstorm. And what I'm hearing around the horn is that there's some interest on this board in doing something with it. So I'm perfectly content to sit here and listen because I'm just tickled to death to hear the conversation. But I'm not, I didn't come in here and say, this is what we're doing. I don't want nobody to think that on no level. This was just, you know, I come at old school. If you're gonna point out a problem, you need to come up with some kind of, something to do with that. So I see this as a problem, and this is Rodney's suggestion as to a way of addressing it. And this is just a starting point. So all these questions come up with environmental health, for the lawyers, for the commissioners. Y'all gonna need to be on board with this, because
I think it's great. You can close the loophole. I have the size that you've got proposed there with those breakdowns, I think is fine. I don't have a problem with that at all. What we need to work out is the grandfathered in lots or the undeveloped lots or whatever you want to call them, that when they buy that 50 or 100 acre farm, and they only build a third of it or
Right.
or 1/8 of it or something like that at a time. The rest of it has to be, it all has to be applicable to all.
Yep.
These standards have to go with the entire tract at the time of the purchase. That's my opinion. The septic part needs to be defined, that we need to make a clear definition of what's public and what's septic.
Right.
And then we need to make a decision about, or make some kind of rule about if it's annexed into the city before it's fully developed, those lot sizes can't change
Well,
regardless of water and sewer.
if it gets annexed in the city, then it would be out of our purview.
That's right.
They zone it. they don't
That's
do it.
right.
Yeah, that'd be there to deal with.
Well, if it's like, if it's brought, if water and sewer is brought to it, but it's not annexed.
And
Not bad choice of words.
no, it's you get the conversation going, the right thing to do, and you've done that. And Eric, you're 100% right in, we need to go around this horn and pick this thing to absolute death, so that somebody else don't come in here and find something we missed and exploit it. Closing loopholes, exactly. That's why we here.
It'll address 3 or 4 things. Overuse of groundwater. It'll maintain some integrity of the open space and the density. So, for me, that's a win.
My thoughts is, we look at the top priority. Something was to happen to the well out in the county, way out in the county. That's a huge issue. You can't get water to it. The only way we can protect that, you should. So this, the larger the better. County, if it gets annexed, I'm not too worried about the, if it gets annexed, they provide water and sewer, because I feel like that at least eliminates the burden on the groundwater.
That's right.
This, in my opinion, where we can protect that groundwater, that you can't make more of it.
Mr. Paisley?
I'm not sure. You're saying hypothetical, you got the 100 acre farm, you develop 25 acres of it, but you want to tie in the other 75. I don't know that you can do that. I want to know if it's legal. Can you still tie up the entire acreage?
Well, that's a question I've got.
Yeah, I don't think you can, but I defer to legal counsel for that.
Well,
I think whatever the laws are at that time,
Well, I think
when the second, third development occur, is what would apply.
okay, so here's my proposal on that, because I've already given this thought. Going back to that original parent tract, 103 acres, whatever it is. And somebody comes in here and buys 12 or 15 off, puts in their 4 houses, and they're in compliance with the 2 acres per lot. And then 5 years down the road, they decide to put in 4 more. So that puts them at a total of 8. And according to this schedule right here, they've got to be on 3 acres apiece. So since these houses over here are only on 2, then we've got to add to these next 4, so that we've got a total of 24 acres of land, because 8 houses requires 3 acres apiece.
My guess is you can't do that for the second. It's whatever the laws are for that, because it's a whole new land acquisition altogether. But I, again, defer to legal counsel for that answer.
Okay, well, if in fact what you set up is right, then we need to get this real right now. So that somebody smart aleck doesn't come in here in an effort to usurp the rules. And I buy the land and then I sell it to Vaughn, and then he sells it to Tanya, and she turns around and sells it to you. And just leave you plumb out. So that, see, there's a problem. This is discrimination. But this is what we're wanting to, of course, you know, I guess if we go back far enough, we can make the case that the whole world was one original parent tract of land. So
Now, I'll say
that
in current ordinance, if you're developing land on a private road, not dedicating or intended to dedicate public, your minimum lot acreage is already an acre.
Okay.
Just, you know, to add a little bit more. to that.
and the question becomes, what's the requirement for making it a public road? You got to have enough, you got to have enough houses on it. It's got to meet the specifications, and the DOT's got to be willing to take it over. Is that correct?
Pretty much, yeah, that will cover it.
Okay.
Or if it's not, they gotta bring it up to the standard for DOT.
Right, and then
Before
they
they'll
petition
take
DOT, and DOT will do their initial inspection upon, like, when we get a major development, before we actually sign those final plans, roads are in. But they're not accepting the roads until they're like 90% capacity in that neighborhood, then you can petition for them to accept the roads.
You got a worse problem. What if there's a new planning board and or new county commissioners?
Yep,
They can always change it.
Well, they can.
We don't have a chisel and a marble tablet. We're just making suggestions.
Well, if we come up with a good enough idea, maybe it would stick a while. Generally speaking, when these tracts are bought and they're subdivided, they bring you plats to approve for subdivision. They're already laid out for the entire acreage, right? Is that right or wrong?
I would say about half the time. I've got probably 4 subdivisions we're looking at now. We did phase 1 last year. All the road frontage was taken up except for enough to bring a road in to go to the back. Now they're bringing me the rest of them in the back. Now, some of the ones that I have 200 units, which we have a couple down near Medon, they brought it all in at one time. They're phasing out as they build, but they brought a master plan in for
So
it.
could the language say something like to include all phases of that development?
The way they get around that is say, we're buying this right now. We don't know that we're gonna do anything else. And then they're like, oh, we decided to do something else a year later.
I guess that brings up another question, not to complicate things, but what if the original landowner or developer proposes, 2-acre lots according to this, but they decide they don't build them? Can they eventually come back and say, change our mind, we want to do 1-acre lots? And then that would do the same thing that we're trying to prevent. They never build it. I mean, I'm wondering the way around it. Could it be something like, if the lot has a house on it, you can't subdivide it anymore outside of whatever the current restrictions were when you first bought that house? Could that help? Is the question. So like an example, we say we go to 2 acres, because it's 4 houses. Then 5 years from now, somebody else buys, the rest of the land, and then the people that are in those 4 houses sell. They couldn't come back and say, I want to subdivide that 2 acres and put another house on that 2 acres. So now you have 2 houses on 2 acres, so 1-acre lots, which will increase the density completely, but they're only dealing with their tract of land. See what I'm saying? So what if one person don't own all the land?
I hear a couple problems with what you're talking, not like, but currently as Alamance County's ordinance is written, you can put multiple houses on one piece of property. So just because you make an acreage minimum doesn't say you can't put more than one house on those 2 acres. The lot, it has to be that big. not how much is going on. So that's a catch that we don't have that language of one principal use on the property.
So we would need to add one unit per lot.
Because that would put more demand on.
And do you
the
want, there are some, okay, so you've got a 5 acre minimum up there for the big ones. Well, they're gonna go and move their business in with their house on the same piece of property. I mean, hey, they got 5 acres. You'd be okay with that too? Because we can do that now. We don't have any restrictions on them. These are things that we hit every day, so I figure I share.
Right.
Well, here again, that's a question that needs to be asked.
Yep.
But if you put 5 houses on 5 acres of land, you got 5 wells, 5 septic tanks, 5 houses. What's that gonna do to your groundwater and the ground? Because, you've got the water part, which is also the septic part. Versus having a house and a warehouse that's full of nuts and bolts on the same 5 acre tract.
Okay, so you got your house and you decide to open up an auto body shop in the back. Well, you've got a business, you can have as many cars in this parked out there leaking stuff if you wish. That's okay, right?
Well, all this is the reason we're having this meeting.
Well, the question is becomes, if they build another building and they've got 10 employees out there, they've got to put a well and septic tank for that facility as well as their home on that same 5 acre tract, right?
Yeah, that's
Right. So then you've got, now you've got 2 and 2 on the same 5 acres.
Wouldn't functioning well take care of a house and a business?
More than likely, but
Put it on yield.
Depends on the
depends on how much you're getting out of it.
Right.
But they're gonna have to have another septic system
Or expand.
or expand the existing one. Or not tell anybody and just run to the back door.
And then I get a call on my phone.
Right.
When I-
Or bring a portal out there.
Well, they can do that. Now, that's legal.
Yeah.
And that's service regularly.
One of the things I heard in your question, I don't think it's exactly what you said, but
Anymore.
if you platted a subdivision and you had 4 2 acre lots, but you never built on them, you never put the well in, you never put the septic in, and water and sewer came available, could you then subdivide those lots and where you've got 8 acres, put 8 houses on the water and sewer provided, no well, no septic element? Still in the county's jurisdiction, but some municipality providing water and sewer.
You would likely have to annex it in anyway. Go back to that
It
same
would be
piece.
inside.
If it's gonna be annexed in, it don't make a difference, but I would
You
certainly,
follow their regulations for lot sizes and dimensions, and that's.
I would think that if water and sewer became available and you had an undeveloped lot, cutting them in 2 and putting 8 houses in there where you had no water interruption and no sewer interruption at all, that would certainly be fine. That's just my thought off the cuff.
Yes, I mean, the cities used to provide sewer outside their jurisdiction and double charge those people. But that went away a few years ago and they really just annexed anything that they would provide, pull that sewer lines. That's a charge for them, much more than water.
Now, the city provides water and sewer out First Street Road
Mhm.
toward Floral Avenue and all that area. And Floral Avenue and all that, that's not in the city limits.
You said Flora?
Flora and Birch Bridge, Pollard and Birch Bridge.
How far does it go?
It might.
Almost Birch Bridge Cafe.
It
I
probably
think.
goes to
Yeah,
Hall
but
River and
probably-
doesn't cross the river.
So much on
That would be my guess.
Well, you got the treatment plant on Birch Bridge Road between Glencoe and Old Glencoe and
Right.
Shore.
Yeah, but I'm talking about
And
once
then
you,
you got a treatment plant that are next to the river, I think.
once you pass Flora Avenue and go down the bottom of the river, cross the Hall River.
Yeah,
Right, I
that's, if
think
you
right
pull
there
it
at the
up, it should
river,
be.
another treatment plant.
I don't think that their water and
I still
sewer
give you
crosses
codes,
the
you can
river.
I don't think it crosses the river, but I know it
And
goes
see,
down.
Flora and
therein
Birch
is a
Bridge.
major obstacle for them, for the water sewer people and the developer people, is
You're in
those
ETJ.
rivers, they
ETJ.
are major
ETJ,
boundaries
okay.
All of Flora looks like it's in
And
ETJ.
stop things from crossing.
Flora and Birch
So
Bridge.
depending on which side of the river that land lays
Just look up Flora.
in the county.
It's the only
or in
Flora in the
city of
counties you should
ETJ.
do.
She said it's in this,
Oh.
and I do
ETJ.
know the city of Burlington at some time plans to run a water line all the way out Durham Street Extension.
See, going south, that's one of the big deals right now. Water and sewer goes south of Burlington till it gets to the river.
That's right, and there's a huge
And when
crossing.
it gets to the
crossing.
river, it ain't going across the river without
It's
a
expensive,
large,
it's expensive
a
across
very
water.
large checkbook is gonna have to be pulled out to get it under that river.
It's expensive across water, that's why AO is not on our system.
That's right.
Yes, it's,
So you're in Burlington's ETJ, then? The little
And-
hashy lines, that's their ETJ.
I do know that Burlington plans in the future, don't know how far to run the water line all the way out Durham Street.
Hmm.
287.
Water's one thing, though, but
Well, they help us
that
build
sewer
ours.
septic is what gobs up their land and such
It
space.
does, and it's.
It's already water and sewer too, on West Old County Road. West Old County Road. Yeah, that's water and sewer too.
Well, I
There's a
knew-
lot of houses out there on that part of the world.
People sit down the lakeside. It's right down there. the street.
Yeah, what all of the Burlington's ETJ.
That's why
I
Burlington.
just
helped
see a
us
lot of
build it.
ways of that crafty developers can get around it. You know, I'm just sitting there looking at this map, it's like it's 300 acres. They say, hey, we're gonna buy all 300 acres. But in our master plan, we turn in and get approved is splitting it up into 300 acres each. They put they can plan for the amount of houses according to this, which will be 2020, 20, I mean, what, 2020 and 20. Do 20, and then decide they can sell the other 200 acres. They can break it up into fours and be able to get more than 20 in that same 100 acres they get crafty. And so it's like, I don't think anything we put in place will stop that scenario. Because you can subdivide small pieces, which is fine, because I'm all for subdividing. But if we're trying to protect the rural character, there's currently ways around it, depending on how you sell and get your land chopped up, which I think doesn't address what we're trying to do. So I don't know, I'm thinking back to the beginning. I don't care if it's 100 acres. You want to put whatever houses, if we have so many people tapped into the water in those 100 acres, that's it. If we can figure out a way to do that, that would be great. In that same 100 acres, if you have only 20 times you tap into the water system on those 100 acres, that would be great. Because otherwise, they can find other ways to tap into that, to the water on those 100 acres if we don't have some sort of restrictions or whatever in place, depending on what the rule is for that year or how they chop their land up. That makes sense?
Ish.
Ish.
And that's why we're here is to, and I'm not sure how much teeth we can have in the original parent tract of land. That's gonna be one of them legal questions. But I think that's where the buck's ultimately gonna have to stop. That it's been sold 15 times doesn't mean it wasn't Grandpa's farm years ago.
So just thought process, we've got this land development plan that we
Mhm.
devised back in 2020. And I was just wondering if somehow it could be,
So let's pull that
Tied to
up. You've got that in the
Yeah.
planning board. We actually put that in the folder expecting to need that tonight.
uh,
Land development plan, you know, big picture talked about the further out in the county you go, the more rural it is, the bigger the lot size should be. You get to the cream of the Oreo in the middle, closer to the city, you should probably lower that lot size so you see some gradients difference in what to expect for the future. Because inevitably, sometime down the road, the closer you get to the cities are gonna pull that stuff into their jurisdiction.
so the
It's on
thought
the screen.
process, there would be like, in like the green areas, the agricultural areas, you just set up one particular type of lot size. And they would have to beg, borrow, and steal for anything else. I mean, it's like that one house, 5 acres. You get into the lighter green, maybe that's where you can help justify some of this.
Well, you have to keep your
development
affordable housing in check. That people can afford to live here, and we need, what state regulations and things say on that. So somewhere along the road, if you're requiring 5 acres, it brings the price of living in a house on 5 acres more expensive than living in a house on 30,000 square feet for your big builders and stuff. So that's probably a good solution to making sure we stay where we need to be for that.
Just a thought, an idea, because we have this land development plan, and part of that, like I'm on page 45. If you go into 46, and they talk about the different future land use characters and why we're doing it, to preserve the rural integrity.
Well, I think this, again, going back to Rodney's original idea, it helps preserve that rural integrity. I mean, it keeps land open, rather than putting houses on top of one another.
And the bullets, and it focuses the growth in municipalities, which is fine, that's inevitable.
Page 44.
Well, so part of that was written, some of y'all hear, some of you weren't, but part of that was written because when we allow, encourage, whatever, very much so dense development further out in the county get, the county's also having to provide services. We've got to get more deputies out there. We've got to provide more EMS. It becomes a bigger cost to the county, where if we concentrate the density, that cost goes down. Is what it's supposed to do.
So why don't we propose putting all the affordable housing inside the city limits?
Well, that sounds great.
You want the room full of 100 again?
That would solve the problem.
You don't want to.
I did hear that.
The cost associated with it.
Right there, that's page 44. Kind of gives you the recommendations of the future land use map. And how that is.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to read an exemption by state law that I think is worth reading tonight.
Okay.
I'll read this slowly, but it's thick. It's a lot to chew. The division of a tract of land in single ownership, an entire area of which is no greater than 2 acres, into not more than 3 lots where no street right-of-way dedication is involved, and where the resultant lots are equal or exceed the standards of described therein. So that's a state law exemption. It could complicate what y'all are trying to do. As a matter of fact, let me just share that so y'all can see that on the screen.
I was about to
That
ask.
sounds like a lot of words.
Down into words that I
Translate.
understand.
Did you say 2 acres and 3 lots?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, the math
There we
doesn't
go.
work
Let me
for
zoom.
the environmental health.
It's at least 2 acres.
29,000 square feet.
I'm sorry, no greater than 2 acres. I'm reading.
Yeah,
something.
that's what I heard. So at 87,000 square feet, would you say 29?
29.
That'd be right.
There you go.
So that's less than 30,000 square foot minimum.
Is this applying to tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3 counties? Is that where this is coming from?
This is a statewide exemption. Just like if you take parcels and combine them together, it's an exempt plat. If you have 3 lots and you're making 3 lots out of it, you just slide lines around, you're still end up with 3 lots, you're exempt. So you don't have to meet subdivision and or zoning regulations when you do that. You only have to meet plating requirements that surveyors have to plat it correctly. These are just things that come in the office. I just wanted to see that.
Would
I
that
like
be
grades.
something like where somebody's cutting land out of a 100-acre farm for grandma, for the granddaughter to build their,
Could be, yeah.
that's kind of thing where that is, where that.
Yeah, and even Rodney's thing said something about family subdivision and what to do with that. So we haven't visited that yet. Yeah, well, legal will look at this for us too when we write it, but that's just something I wanted to bring up, so I felt like that might weigh in on the discussion.
So this is a state deal here.
Yep.
State law.
All right, so at what point do we cross the line from state, local rules and whichever is the most stringent applies?
This restricts us from being able to put any restrictions on it. It's a statewide exemption, local government cannot touch it. So we can't, they are the stringent, we can't even touch it.
Well, which one of the representatives from Alamance County put these in?
Well, I'm not sure, this has been some years ago. Yeah, and if you subdivide more than 10 acres, you're not required, appropriate access is required by our ordinances, you access it however you want to. So that is if you're at 10.01, then I have to allow you to go forward, whether you've landlocked yourself or anything, you're allowed to go forward.
Which is the way to get out of meeting the subdivision rules, is make the lots more than 10 acres.
That's what state law calls for. And we actually have quite a bit of acreage in the county that is landlocked, that's over that 10 acres. And then we have people buying it, not doing the research, and then, well, how am I gonna build my house? Well, you got me. Better start asking some favors, yeah. Drop it in, yeah.
Put a gantry crane out there and just roll it in. There's a subdivision down in southeast part of the county. And when the property was divided in the late 80s, they built a road. And where the road comes out to the main road, it's at the crest of a hill or just past it in a curve. Dangerous, super dangerous. And the original driveway comes out in a different place, and it's got plenty that you can see from ever. So the old man owned the driveway, passed away, new people own it. And the folks in the development, it's not a subdivision, but the people who live behind it, they like using the old road because it's safe. So it comes time to work on the road, and they go to the guy who owns the road and says, "What your thoughts on this?" He said,
No,
"I
this
don't
is
mind
just
you driving on the road." They said, "Will you have to pay on the fix?"
It might be in the very
He
beginning
said,
of
"I'm
this.
paying the tax on it." You want to use it?
Can you look up the statute for
Goes
that?
where my wife stops.
So I don't like flip pages and people lose them.
Your order is.
Well, I think we're still here. So do you have some stuff that you and legal can work on in preparation for the next meeting? I don't think we've got anything to take any action on tonight.
I don't think you do. Patrick, are you clear on what we need to work on? Because I might need some clarity myself.
I got a pretty good grasp on it.
I will just do what he does then.
Okay.
Where did this lot size concern come about from? What was the origin?
That in that folder right here.
Well, actually, I mean, it's right for them.
Rodney had a sweet spot for it a long time.
It's revitalized it.
You know, when the Snow Camp zoning piece came along, part of that proposal was to increase minimum lot sizes anyway. So that discussion was on purpose because the public spoke of that when we were doing it. So the public actually came to us during the public meetings and things, and that's how that language got put in there. So I think there has been an interest, just a matter of what interest for the whole county. Because once y'all make some type of text minute recommendation here, that does go to the commissioners, and that is a public advertised hearing. So, yeah. Should we get to the point where we're ready to do that, we can reach out to different groups and see, kind of fill out what everybody's thinking before we get into a public meeting.
In general, development pressure in this county is going, if not already great, is going to be greater. And it's going to be great.
I think there's some real,
Greater in a very short window of time, and I'm talking about the next 4 to 8 years, probably, you know, maybe less than that.
To that point.
And so, you know, my feeling is if we don't figure out some way to act on what's left out there that's open space, there's not gonna be a lot of open space left. And this young lady brings up a lot of good points. We've got a lot of issues. What do we, where we want to put these people? They all want to come. I mean, I like Alamance County. I live here. It's a beautiful place, but it's not gonna look like the same Alamance County in 10 years. No matter what happens in this room or in his room or in this county. I mean, it's just gonna change dramatically. And most of it's gonna be driven by money and lots of money. And there's so much development pressure coming from the other counties.
He doesn't have a badge.
Because there's so much growth over there. They're running out of places for the people to go.
He said he was understanding.
So that's gonna bleed over into this county.
That's not who I thought it would be.
I think she knocked it hard.
Y'all know what we're talking about when I said collecting the cover for the floor show now, don't
Pardon me. Everybody.
So anyway, that's where this is, to me, that's the driver in this whole thing. The questions that have come up tonight are real questions. I mean, it sounds like it's gonna be a great challenge to figure out what exactly can be changed and how can we change it. Are we even gonna be able to get anything close to what Roger was? I'd like, on the outside looking in, that's, like, I'm ready, let's stamp it and go. But it's not that simple. We've raised a lot of points tonight that make a lot of difference about how it's gonna look. We can't even decide which way sewer runs right now. We gotta figure out,
What is the
I
definition
think
of sewer?
I think it goes downhill. That's most of the time,
Grass is greens.
But, this is, y'all, we fundamentally got to figure out, what do you want this place to look like? Where you want them to live, where you want them to work, and how you want to pay for it.
I think you're gonna have to look at your,
It's taxes, property taxes don't pay for residential. They cost the county money. Farmland pays the county money. They make 40 cents on an acre of farmland after services are provided. Am I right, Mr. Chairman?
And industrials even pays.
Industrial does better. It's
Yeah.
the most cost-effective development we can have. That's not what people wanted to hear in this room, a couple of months ago, but it's the facts are the facts. But the cows don't go to school. They don't have to pay tax. There's money made on PUB.
There's money when they don't dial 911.
There's right. There's money lost on residential development.
And you can't get around an ambulance either.
Right. No, they use a bigger thing like that. But it's, we've got some serious issues here. We've got to figure out what are we going to do and how we're going to do it.
And realistically, how restrictive can or do we want to be?
Well, part of it, the can is the bigger question. Patrick's going to come up with those answers. The cans are going to probably dictate what we do. As much as we want to, there's a lot of words that say, unless we go to Raleigh on Jones Street and get some real law change, there's a whole lot of what we're bound to that we won't be able to do but so much with it in the first place.
Question for, was it Rob? What's the minimum distance or minimum spacing of one well to another well?
We have our own, it's 25 feet,
It's only 25, okay, I was thinking it was much greater than that. What's the minimum spacing from one septic system to another septic system?
What, 20 feet,
How
20.
But then from the well to the septic.
It's 50, and the well to the house is 25,
And septic to lot line?
10 feet.
The bigger thing is where the relationship from the well to the septic tank, right?
We held for many years, 100-foot minimum radius around the well and a 50 to septic and 50-foot radius to the building foundation until the state adopted rules. I don't remember what it was, 2010 or something like that. where we deferred back to theirs, just 50-25. For a long time,
Are you restricted to those? I mean,
that's minimal.
that's minimal. We can go to, if we,
You can go past that. You
Right.
can't go closer.
could the county, I mean, is that, I don't know how you,
Can we change that on the county level?
Right.
So what you're asking?
yes.
It's in our well ordinance. Where it is.
That may be your driver, if that's, if you want to minimum lot size,
Yeah,
that
we
could
did
be
for a long time.
your
Okay.
current
Those are under-
That's not
septic
planning
system
board,
versus
that's-
another system.
Yeah.
Or well versus another.
That's
not
not
very
very
much
much. How many holes in the ground?
I'm not sure I feel comfortable. with
Period.
that.
Because to me, that seems really close from one well to another, because I know that, you know, you drill a well and have your drawdown radius around the center point of the well.
Get 4 in this
And then
room.
You need
To have two,
So just to give y'all information, y'all
5, you
don't,
can put one in the middle.
y'all don't have jurisdiction on that ordinance. Public Health Board makes that ordinance and they handle that.
who makes the ordinance?
Public Health Board.
Okay.
That board meets once a month too, but
Yeah.
y'all can't put that in your ordinance because you don't have jurisdiction.
So we would have to have that public health board work with us to increase that.
Or hear suggestions of these.
Yeah.
That's kind of back to what I was originally referring to. You got 100 acres. Space that out 50 feet each. I don't matter how many houses you put there, you can only put X amount of holes in the ground. However they subdivide or whatever. I think that's probably the most important piece. How many holes in the ground we're gonna allow in the county across to keep from destabilizing the aquifers, et cetera.
And we'll say we have some language about private roads in here. Private road language is dated, to say the least, in here. Our Lee County Attorney Deborah has looked at it and wants to continue working with that as y'all move through your lot size to update that language. There's been some conversations at the state as to what they want to do with counties and private roads, because currently counties don't have a mandate or enabling at all to maintain any roads, which is certainly our intent to keep it that way and make sure the ordinance certainly keeps us out of any of that.
I should ask this question, but I'll ask it anyway. Do we think we're at a point where we should consider recommending to the board moratoriums until we figure this out? I think we can figure it out. And the only reason why I asked that is because just looking around, driving around, everybody's trying to build as they can. Currently, no restrictions right now.
That's already there, correct? These are already housed.
Yes. The numbered ones are like.
The open space.
Yeah, farms.
I don't know if they support that.
I don't either. I don't know if they will support it, but I was just curious, do we, as a planning board, think that we can figure something out? Right now, there's no restrictions at all, no requirements as it relates to building in the county lot size,
Well, there's the.
other than the,
what we got
you
right
know,
there.
other than, if we look at minimum spacing for well and septic, which is a lot smaller than what we're talking.
So if somebody come in your office today and paid you the fee and give you a plat on a subdivision, it would be official today. We could vote on something tonight, make a recommendation to county commissioners. They could in fact change the rules at their next meeting. But what you done today would still be in compliance with the old rules.
Right, they would have to pick an ordinance. They could pick new or old, they're in the middle, so they could pick whichever. They can't cherry pick each ordinance. You go one or the other set of rules, but they could.
So how many subdivisions do you have in the process right now? Matter of fact, you or the health department, public environmental health, that it's not gonna make any difference because they're already in the works.
How many lots do you want me to start with? Are we talking about 4-acre lots or we want 15 or more?
Start with 1-acre lots.
1 acre, or how many lots is what?
Just how many?
Yeah.
How many subdivision applications do you have? This question makes it sound like there's thousands of them in the pipe as we speak.
Not thousands.
My suspicion is it's high, that's why.
No, I think we're probably currently looking at the present time, 10 to 12, some of which I know are coming and are in the works. Some are in my office, some we've approved and they haven't brought in applications yet, so.
Okay,
So I probably have
Average size.
even 2-lot subdivision and higher.
right.
I think I've got about 50 sitting in the queue. Some of them, we've sent comments, this or that, they're somewhere in the process. But you're talking about little bitty lots to 200 acres, or
Okay.
200,
About 25.
All sorts.
About 25.
All lots.
25
Okay.
plus.
Now, did everybody hear that?
Say it again.
All right, she's got a generic 50 subdivisions in the pipe now, and that range from 2 lots to
Probably 20,
20, 2 to 20.
from like 25 units up.
Okay, so she's got 20 subdivision of 25 units plus. That's
Okay,
larger subdivisions.
okay.
Some of these have been sitting out for a while, they're not brand new to us or anything.
And environmental health has got a dozen things in the pipe.
They hear about stuff sometimes before I do.
Okay. So. If somebody wants to make a motion on a moratorium, I'm gonna be the chairman, I'm gonna entertain. My concern is if we use the word moratorium in official action, it's gonna create a tidal wave of that may be the right thing to do. But it may not be the right thing to do. If you had to take a guess, how long is it gonna take us to get this verbiage worked out? Can it be done by the next meeting? Or we look at 2 or 3 months down the road?
2 or 3 months,
So
unless
we
y'all want
look
to
at-
call special meetings.
Say again,
Unless you want special meetings, not your once a month.
well, somebody may, but I can call one person, they who don't. Okay,
Spectrum.
We'll put a work order in for that. Why don't we just do that?
Check to this.
And Mr. Chairman, I
Yes,
do
sir.
have one note, just to clarify, because I think there might be some confusion from what Tanya was trying to explain from the permit choice. From they get to decide which ordinance they want to apply or have apply to them. That is in effect once their permit application is submitted, not when it's approved.
Okay.
So there could be a potential for if a moratorium, if that word is used and voted on, that a flood of applications come in and create more of a problem.
So if it's discussed here, the commissioners have to vote it in, it has to be advertised, so you're talking several weeks in between. Anybody that's scared to death is gonna be in the office before their meeting. So that's something to consider.
And then they're in under the deadline.
Right,
They still have to have plat and be able to apply for this for the plat, right? So, and that's if
they have to
a guy
have a raw
like Steven can
sketch.
get it drawn up in time.
They wouldn't have to have a surveyor look at anything, they can do a rough sketch on that. As simple as hand drawn, our ordinance is very vague on what is minimum. And we can turn it down and give 5,000 reasons why, but they submitted something.
Isn't there also a timeline that you have to respond to their application? That as such, if you
Our
don't
ordinance won't
respond
say
by-
that.
It doesn't,
Mm-mm. I
okay,
think it says reasonable.
okay. Because some ordinances, like Rockingham County, I think if they don't respond in 45 days, then it's automatically approved.
That's true.
And see, the one thing we don't know, is there could be multiple developments sitting out there in the drawer that we don't know about, and something, we do some action like that, and they say, oh, snap, let's get those out, and we're going to grab tomorrow because we need to beat this potential roadblock.
And if I don't, I mean, I guess my hesitation on the moratorium, if we don't see a finish line, we probably should start. We got a lot of questions, a lot of things to work through. I personally would want to implement something like that if we knew we had a clear finish line.
Clear cut, they can get it, yeah, I agree with that.
With that, I will not make a motion.
So,
I think next month y'all have a little more clarity, because this month was more discussion. I don't know that we're gonna be truly approving the text of it next month. I think there'll still be more discussion, but we'll have a better feel on that time frame.
I think for everybody's benefit, especially Ms. Graves, we need to review kind of where we have gone through tonight without, another hour discussion, but just basically where we started, what the 5 or 6 main concerns are, the lot size, the septic, such as that, and after that I entertain a motion.
And I would agree with that. I have one question. What's the current minimum lot size?
30,000.
30,000? And we're discussing increasing it to 2 acres.
That's with this, that's septic as well.
Yeah, that's your own
Yeah,
personal.
yeah, septic and well, not public utilities or community types.
So that's a way down over it.
Sure. Okay.
I will say, just for clarity, when I do that 30,000, there's language in here about marginal land. I think Taylor put that in. If anything, like floodplain and things are a part of that lot, they have to pull that out and meet the minimums outside of that total. So if you have a
The
large,
buildable area. is
Yeah.
Essentially that 30,000.
yes, if you have a large amount of floodplain on a piece of property, you've got to meet those minimums outside of that.
All right, that's- Who's gonna be the one to summarize?
Well, I think Vaughn's off to a
Yeah.
good start. I'm gonna
Well-
impose on him.
So we started with Rodney's proposal of new minimum lot sizes for development. And we had, there is somewhere, there's a paper, I wrote down those, but there was a
I got it. Hold on.
mimeograph sheet up there on the
1
board.
minute.
There was a PowerPoint presentation, one point.
There we go.
There you go.
It was single power. So then after this, we talked about public, we talked about wells and septic tanks. What was the definition of public sewer versus public septic systems, how that applied to certain, like, for example, they got 20 acres and they want to subdivide it, but only have 4 acres of it perks. They want to build how many houses on it. And that was one of the things that was allowed,
Well, I went down, let Sandy in. Y'all talk about a lot of stuff while I was locked out.
No, I got on the soapbox, started preaching about how we
Don't.
how the development's done, we don't fundamentally figure out something we don't have.
So then we were introduced to a lot of different scenarios that can complicate things if we stuck to just land. Because there's all sorts of creative things that developers could do to include engineered septic systems. and all that other
cluster
stuff.
systems.
Right. Then we also talked about, now I'm starting to remember now. If there was 100 acres and they don't develop all of it at one time. Well, on the 15 acres plus, it's 5 acres per house. And they've got 100 acres. Well, suppose they don't develop all of it at one time. Then how do we address the rest of, can we make them, hold them to that lot size, where if they're only gonna do, the 4 acres at a time, and they're developing 100 acres, but they only build 4 acres out at once.
So many units.
Like if they phase it out.
Right.
which
Then
ones
how
do
do
they
we,
have?
how do we
Do
make,
they-
how do we hold their feet to the fire and make them keep all it? Mr. Pacey says, not sure that we can. But Mr. Patrick's gonna research long and deep and figure that out. But that's a concern because, you know, it makes it sound like no matter what we do, there's gonna be a way around. They're gonna have an end run on every project that they got. You know, as Tanya says, they'll buy the 100 acres and they'll lay out, you know, a minimum amount of lots. And you say, well, what about well, we don't know if we're gonna do anything with that or not, which is probably a lie. But that's the, you know, the answer for today, because they don't have to be held to this standard. And that's what we would like to try to hold them to this standard on the entire plat, on that entire Aunt Sally's 100-acre farm. But I don't know that, we don't know if we can. So that was the other part of it. We want to know, can we? We need to define what's public sewer, what's public septic, and how that applies to this. Anthony brought up a great idea about, with Rob's help, how close can wells be? Is that a way to fix, you might have heard that talk about, you know, 25 feet right now. You know, look at this room.
Didn't it used to be like 100 feet?
We've always had 25 feet.
No, was it 100 off the well and septic, maybe 100 feet off each other?
But anyway, that may be another way to address it.
But that's not the current law, right?
No, the current is 50.
50.
50 is the current.
Stretch back, yeah. That helps.
You know, you see a lot of subdivisions that the road's built in there, and it's not a cul-de-sac at the end of that
Just stubbed
road.
off.
That road just stubs off into the edge of the trees. And you know what that means. They got an option, or they're thinking about an option on what's out there. And that's the part that we're talking about. What can we make them do? As Tom said, some of them come, they're all plotted and platted out, and so for those, it's already a done deal.
Well, sometimes they're required to put those dead end streets to the property line.
So
Not that they don't want to do it, but some ordinances require them to do it.
Oh,
our ordinances don't, our fire marshal does make sure he has some kind of a DOI standard turnaround. He's got a Y, he's got a T, he's got a cul-de-sac, he's got something.
And the reason they were required to do that in some places is they put that dead end street to the property line so that it can provide interconnectivity from one development to another, should that adjacent parcel develop, to lessen the burden of traffic on the main roads that is connected to. That's why those things are done.
That's absolutely right.
anyway, so that's kind of where, what have I left out?
And the well thing was, it's not pertinent. That would fall under Board of Health, so we really couldn't
I think
put
that's-
anything in there about the well space. We have to figure out a way to talk to the Board of Health and all that. And then we did pick up, land, what was it called?
Yeah, you got an existing land development plan that was approved back in 2020 ahead of, it included a proposed snow camp plan, but this land development plan addresses the whole county in general of rural integrity and stuff like that. That's not included in the snow camp plan, that's a whole separate section.
With the premise of allowing growth being more close to municipalities and out in the rural areas.
With more green space and that kind of thing.
So currently, our ordinance doesn't have an open space requirement. Most do. That's something to consider, to make sure your houses aren't stacked and they suck up every piece of land other than what they needed for roads.
So they
You can
got
require that as a
green
percentage.
space in the subdivision.
Right. They don't have to do anything with it. You don't have to put a playground if you so choose to, your HOA can, but something that breaks up just monotony of continuous lines.
How long would that last? And this is not county, but I'll bring this up because in Graham, over there in the South Park, right there on Moore Street and Rogers Road. When that was first developed, there was a corner out there that was undeveloped. And I was in landscaping business then, and I kept in landscaping some houses in there, and I asked, what's that there? That's our green space. We're required to keep that for open space. I would entertain, anybody wants to ride down Rogers Road today, might be dark now, but you can go by in the morning, and notice that green space isn't so green anymore. It's full of houses.
So when it's approved, it's supposed to be in perpetuity, so forever and ever, as long as that subdivision exists, it exists.
I think they changed developers.
So they may have went back to the city, and maybe they've got a different zoning district on now, and they don't have to do that anymore, they got rezoning, they could
But it-
get a couple more lots.
You know, that's so, you know, there's a thing that makes you scratch your head and say, huh. The rules apply most of the time, but now,
And this is the thing about government. In other words, all you gotta do is get the right people to vote the right way and change the rules, and then you just keep on. So what we're doing here, yeah, we put in place that no more houses in Alamance County. But the next group comes in here, change the rules, and it's loaded up, and there we go.
so is that enough of, is that review enough for you, Patrick?
On page 50 of that land development plan?
Sure.
'Cause it gave through some recommendations. Page 49 was talking about the actual existing subdivision design, and then 50 kind of went through some recommendations on how to address maybe some of these open spaces
Well,
and
let's use
stuff
the
like
rule
that.
then.
And then, of course, as you can see, 3.1 actually addressed rural agricultural.
Ah,
That's 5 and 12. So there were some larger spaces, but some of the other sections there talk about lot sizes with green spaces and this and that, and the other. Alluded to.
Really.
Is this the Vision 2020?
No, this was the land development plan. The Vision 2020 was way more than just the planning department, but this is simply future land growth for the county, land development,
2020 had the 5 pillars.
I believe so. Because that was written before, it was supposed to expire, it was like growth through 2020 was its goal.
It was the one that had preserve open space and agriculture as the first pillar.
Mhm. So this is our 10 to 15 year, what we see as could be the growth for the county and the capacities that this was approved November 2020. So the zoning ordinance, there's language at the very end of this that gives you your small area sections of the county, and the Snow Camp zoning ordinance came out of this plan. Because this is long range to get, if you have a goal to set, then you do the short range information to get you to that long range goal. Is kind of why this was done. And this was approved by previous board right before they left. Yeah. We had a couple planning board members that actually sat on this one. We can provide this in next one's packet to the land.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is kind of a fill our way around, see what y'all need from me.
Right. This was absolutely intended to start the conversation. And that I believe has happened. Has anybody got anything else? Was there any old business that needed to be attended to?
Yes, sir. I do. Staff would just like to update y'all on the RV park ordinance. So RV park ordinance went to county commissioners in May. So discussion public was, the public hearing was the second meeting in May. So then it was tabled to be at the June 6th meeting this past Monday. So due to budget being on the agenda and everything, it's been tabled until the June 20th meeting for discussion.
Have they shared any idea what they're thinking different from what we proposed?
They haven't shared the idea, just that they are thinking different.
Okay.
That's all I got.
I'd like to make a recommendation, we adjourn this meeting.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Sorry for the disruption.
No, you're good.